to welcome you to this webinar. Really important one too for those of you who are really trying to free yourself up from the woes of business, and that's working on rather than in your business. Now, you're in your business, you're answering the phones, you're replying to emails, talking with team members, fighting fires, juggling all the elements of your business at once: the marketing, sales, management, operations, finances, cash flow, debtors, creditors, suppliers, and a whole lot more. You're extremely busy and you've just realized that you forgot to eat lunch again, and someone unexpected has just walked through the door. Unfortunately, it means you're going to have to spend some time with them instead of completing that paperwork you really wanted to finish. Oh well, I guess you can always take it home tonight. Sound familiar? That's what working in your business usually means. You're in the midst of it and trying to handle it all and be everything to everybody. If there's one thing that characterizes the typical smaller business manager, it's that they are busy people. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It really depends on just what they're busy doing. If it's working in the business, that is covering all the bases of day-to-day operations rather than on the business thinking about how to improve the business, then it's the wrong sort of busy. There's a bridge that every owner must cross in order to grow their business beyond a certain point, a point where they must transition from doing to leading. It means stepping back from day-to-day operations and slipping into the role of an overseer. It also means learning to delegate more significant responsibilities to your team members. But for many of you, I know this is difficult as you probably look at your business as your baby. The problem is you'll now be limiting your potential to your own capacity. You've just become your own worst bottleneck. And you'll not be able to develop your business any further unless you systemize so that you can effectively delegate. What it is not is trying to turn your business into a McDonald's. They're a great example of the benefits of systemizing for sure. They use technology wherever possible, and where it's not possible, they employ cheap 15-year-old trained human machines and remove flexibility and initiative. Just try ordering a breakfast 5 minutes after the official stop time. Most businesses, though, require initiative, so the McDonald's model isn't really the right one in most cases. The basic rule for systemizing is to systemize the routine and humanize the exception. And in fact, if you look at it, you'll find that much of what you do is routine and maybe provides little value add for the business, so why are you doing it? What if you are able to take a few steps back from your business and look at it objectively, saying, without me, what would happen? What do I want to happen? What needs to be done to free me up from working in it all the time? If your business were a lump of clay, what would you mold it into? And just thinking about that, you can sense the huge difference that this could make. Imagine taking some time away from day-to-day tasks and looking at your business in the longer term. Think of the creative ideas or opportunities that you could come up with. This is working on the business. Working on your business is the difference between your business just providing you with a job versus helping you to attain your personal goals. So think about why you went into business in the first place. Financial independence, to be your own boss, to spend more time with your family. How many of those goals have you actually attained? The fact is, most of us jump or fall into business. Before we know it, we're so busy that we have no time to think about what we want from the business, how it will be shaped, and what it will be like the day that we retire or sell it. Stephen Covey, in his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, says to begin with the end in mind. In other words, whenever you start a process, understand exactly what the end point is before you start. Think about that in the context of a business. How many business owners actually do that? End in mind thinking can make a profound difference. And let's take a couple of different hamburger restaurants, for example. When Ray Kroc founded McDonald's, he had absolutely no intention of working behind a counter. In fact, he never even made a hamburger. He began with a different end in mind. He envisioned thousands of McDonald's stores around the world, each doing exactly the same thing in a predictable manner. Knowing that, he knew he wouldn't be able to work in them. Therefore, they would have to work without him. He then developed processes and systems structured around how to hire people, the color the restaurant should be, the way a restaurant should be managed, right down to the way they should heat the buns. All of this occurred by having a vision, determining what needed to be done to get there, and then carefully going over every little detail. So contrast that with the owners who run a typical hamburger joint. They're doing it every single day. And that's precisely because they didn't begin with the end in mind. They set up a business that depended on the owner doing just about everything. Their only vision was of ordering the goods to make the hamburgers, doing the stock control, frying the fries, grilling the burger, buttering the buns, wrapping it all up, ringing up the sale, and hoping to make ends meet at the end of the day. As Michael Gerber points out in his book, The E-Myth, it's a myth that most businesses are started by entrepreneurs. Gerber suggests that most businesses are actually started by a person suffering from an entrepreneurial seizure. That is, instead of creating a business that works, we create a business that's us, a business that often becomes all-consuming, and worse yet, when it all becomes too much, we sell our most precious asset for far less than it would have been worth if we had started with the end in mind. But it doesn't have to be that way. There really is another path. Consider again the true purpose of your business. Once you get the thought processes of beginning with the end in mind going, the true purpose comes out. Isn't the purpose of a business to create life for you and for the people with whom you interact? A central theme in Gerber's E-Myth is that most businesses fail or never reach their full potential because their owners spend too much time doing the work that the business does rather than managing and growing it. Creating a systemized way of doing things is the key to breaking that cycle. So an important step to start working on your business is to simply develop systems for nearly everything. A number of things happen when you do systemize your business operations. Firstly, it means, of course, you don't have to perform the process. It empowers your team members to take on more responsibility. And you automatically develop what we call the way we do it here. Creating the way we do it here means developing systems, processes, documentation, and team member training to ensure your business runs smoothly, consistently, and most importantly, without you. Creating the way we do it here also makes your business worth a lot more. After all, you're no longer limiting future purchases to people who have industry knowledge or the energy or desire to work the long hours needed to do everything themselves. Systemizing your business makes it worth more because if at some point you decide to sell the business, you're handing over a business worth many times more than when you started, simply because you thought about and developed the systems that allow the business to function successfully without you. And if you decide to stay involved in the business in some way, you know that it can function independently of you. It's not part of your life. You've developed a business that you're a part of, yet you're still apart from. Think about that concept by comparing the local hamburger restaurant to McDonald's. Now, in which one would you rather have an investment? Probably McDonald's. And why? Because McDonald's makes better hamburgers? Probably not. You'd pick McDonald's shares because the company works like clockwork no matter which restaurant you visit. They all have completely systemized processes that make them consistently high quality and very successful. Walt Disney told a story of being asked by a child if he drew all the Mickey Mouse cartoons. And he replied, "I had to admit that I don't draw anymore." "Then do you think up all the jokes and stuff?" asked the child. "No, I don't do that either," admitted Disney. Finally, the child looked at him and said, "Mr. Disney, just what do you do?" And his response, "Well, sometimes I think of myself as a little bee. I go from one area of the studio to another and gather pollen and sort of stimulate everybody. I guess that's the job that I do." That was good thinking, Walt. The legacy, the bits of pollen, if you will, that Disney left behind still exists today and will for a long time to come. He created systems and processes that resulted in an indelible way we do things here. That includes empowered team members sharing a truly unique culture and passion for what they do, and millions of happy customers who come back again and again to get that same magic feeling. These days, the way we do business can be just as important as what we do. As customers become better educated and more discerning, they often expect more in terms of customer service, the way they're treated and how the product or service actually delivers. Given that, it's important to review the processes, those actions that make up your business, and implement strategies and systems to improve them. Now, this could range from picking up the phone on the second ring, which shows you're attentive to their needs, using awesome service to show customers how special they are to you, improving your sales process, better educating your team members on the products and services you offer, and more importantly, the benefits to the customer that they bring. Going the extra mile when it comes to serving them, improving the speed of delivery, and yeah, there's a lot more too. It's important that you sit down with your team and think about what you could be doing differently to improve the way that you do business. It empowers team members and lets them feel that they are a proactive rather than reactive part of the improvement. In addition, the team members working on the front line can come up with a wealth of creative ideas to systemize the processes they perform on a daily basis. Let's look at a simple activity your team can use to start examining your current processes and systemizing them. Using a whiteboard, draw a large square in the middle. On the left-hand side of the square, you may want to draw 3 arrows hitting the box, something like on the screen now. On the right-hand side of the box, draw 1 arrow coming out of it. And call the arrows on the left-hand side inputs and the one on the right-hand side output. Now get your team to think of any process in the business that might be able to be systemized. For example, answering the phone. The inputs are the number of incoming calls and the outputs is the number of orders. It's a very important conversion or key performance indicator for most of you, I think. Another one could be greeting customers. The inputs are arriving customers and the outputs are the number of transactions that result. Inputs could be customer complaints, where the customer complains and the output is the degree to which we had resolution. Or it could be quality assurance. The inputs, the product or service, and the output was the amount of accuracy or perhaps customer feedback and satisfaction surveys. So if in the middle of the square we should then write the word system and explain that the only way to get more outputs is to develop an effective system in the box. Taking the phone as an example, it could be that an input is when a customer calls and asks, what's the price of product X? The current system you have in this case could be a team member simply giving the price in response. And then the customer then says something like, okay, thanks, I'll call you back, and there's no output. The only way to change that situation is to change the system. How the team member handles the call to generate an order or a sale. Now take your team through the list of processes you've chosen. Determine the inputs, be clear on the outputs and the current activities that occur in your business and how you can improve them to obtain the desired outcome by developing a system for each one of them. When managers start implementing the total quality management system that was big right back in the 1980s, a lot of research was done on what actually led to poor quality output. Among manufacturing firms, the interesting result was that as much as 85% of error in production, 85% was commonly due to systems. That is, the way management set up work to be done rather than the employee making mistakes in the way they did things. 85% of mistakes translates as a lot of the dollars in waste that are lost in every business every single year, and all because of poor systems. If there's one thing that characterizes the typical small business manager, it's that they really are busy people. So when you're looking at systemizing, it's all about freeing yourself up from the routine. Look at all the things that you do and decide which ones really add value to your business, and then look at ways that you can systemize the rest of it, the routine functions, so that you can humanize the exception. You can begin the process of improving your business systems by starting at home, with looking at what you do, why you do it, and how you do it. You'll improve your productivity. You'll learn a lot about how to analyze processes as well, and that will be useful in looking at other activities in your business. Most small business managers have never taken the time to analyze what they do, so they can't possibly teach it to someone else. Before trying to teach your job to anyone, you must first systemize that job. I recommend that you spend at least a month or so observing your job as an owner or manager and documenting what you do day by day. The diary you end up with is going to be useful for a couple of things. It will show you just how much time you are spending working in rather than on, for starters, and it will suggest which jobs could be handled by someone else once they're systemized. Even, I might add, if that person is outside your organization. Then you can go to work systemizing the jobs you want to shift to someone else. It's not so difficult to create small-scale routines and document them so others can be taught how to do the job. Maybe you'll even notice ways to simplify it or dumb it down a little to make it easier for others. Having an effective system to guide a process can save you and your team both time and money. Systemizing processes means that things are done consistently, regardless of the team member doing it. Anything that cannot be systemized needs to be run by people, so it's often cheaper and more effective in the long term to see if it can't be systemized and avoid the need to employ more people. Now let's consider the larger picture, improving the various processes in the business as a whole. I want to make a distinction here too between what I'll call operations and what I call processes. The reason I do that is because when people start talking processes, they quickly get bogged down in just what a process is. Some want to talk about marketing as a process or production, but these are all too high level for my purpose. I call these high level activities operations. Each operation, though, is made up of a number of activities or discrete tasks, and these are what I refer to as processes. Often one process flows through several operations. For example, the billing process, which takes inputs such as the price per unit from the production operation, the billing address, and other customer details from your CRM, your customer relationship management operation, and which will ultimately, of course, impact on the finance operation. So for our purposes, I'm going to restrict the use of the term process to a group of activities that builds to completing some identifiable larger task. So that's enough of that for now. Yes, there are literally hundreds of processes in your business, from how you organize your filing system, to invoice order management, to assembling the product, to how the checks get banked, to the sales system you use. Without looking at the way you do things in your business, I can't talk about any of these specifically because, well, they'll vary extensively depending on the type and size, of course, of your business. There's no such thing as a one-size-fits-all process, but there is a common procedure for analyzing the way a process is carried out and then systemizing the way it's done. And that way applies to all businesses, irrespective of the industry and irrespective of size. So let's take a look at it. As we go with this, keep in mind that this process is meant to answer three basic questions about, number one, does it need to be done at all? Number two, is it being done in the most effective way? And related to that, is it being done in a systemized manner, which is one aspect, of course, of it being done in a most effective way? There are hundreds of processes in any business. Your first decision is to consider which ones to give priority to, since you can't go changing them all at once. That would be a nightmare. So I suggest starting by identifying the systems where changes will make the biggest difference. Generally, these will be the really key processes. You can use a form to list your processes and what you currently know about them, and from that decide which would be best to address short term and which ones you can leave for the longer term. Once you've identified a process you want to assess, the first step is to map how it currently operates. And this is called process mapping. There's more than one way to map processes. In fact, there's a whole range of them, but I tend to find a couple of common ones. The plot process and the flow chart will be sufficient for most of the activities in your business. These two methods will provide the understanding you need of how things are currently working before you go about trying to change it. The plot process method is a handy one for visualizing the basic steps in a process. That means you can see which steps add value and where there may be some duplication. And that might suggest a way of reorganizing the process or eliminating duplicate effort and making the process cheaper and more effective. If you can't totally eliminate a step, you may at least be able to simplify it. This type of analysis should work for any process in your business and can help you add value to your entire business. The plot process uses symbols, much like a flow chart, to signify what is happening at particular stages of the game. You can gather other useful information on this type of form as well that will show if the process is currently being managed, specifically who owns the process, the person who's responsible for the successful operation of the process as a whole, how results are measured, and where it starts and ends. Now, there's a question there that's just come up, and I can tell you that there's an example of this in the action plan that you're going to receive for attending this webinar, so have a look at that, and that will save you from having to scribble all this down right now. The second common method is flow charting. No doubt you've all seen an example of these somewhere. Again, I've included that of the timber yard operation with the Shape Your Business Action Plan that will be emailed to you after this webinar. Flowcharts can provide a really detailed picture of a process, including information on how and where decisions are made. And this can be really useful in a number of ways and provide a really detailed picture of a process, including information on how and where decisions are made. It can also be useful in a number of other ways, like where all decision making is concentrated in one person, or every decision has to go back through that person before processes can move on. Then you not only have a bottleneck, you may also have a very overworked manager. It can reveal where there are weaknesses in your internal control system that might leave you open to a bit of fraud going on. It can suggest also more efficient ways of performing a process. Here's a pretty practical example based on my experience this morning. It's really important when analyzing your business that you don't get bogged down in detail. It can be useful to do with post-it notes before trying with pen on paper. It's easier to move the post-it notes around than to consistently and constantly erase lines and reconnect things. Finally, don't forget to go over it with the person actually responsible for or who does the job. It's amazing how your idea of what is happening and the reality may have diverged over some time. If your process really isn't involved or it's critical to your business success, then it's worthwhile calling in someone with some experience, I'd suggest, to help you with it. Once you've mapped the process, some time spent analyzing how it's working will help you to identify if there are any problems or even some flaws in it. Firstly, it should show if the process itself is really necessary. Some just may not be. Processes build up as your business grows, and some may exist from habit, superstition, or some previous need. Secondly, it will allow you to determine if it has the characteristics of an effective process, such things as on the slide right now, or if it looks like it could do with some sort of improvement. Using the plot process and flowchart of the timber yard operation, I'd immediately note a couple of things that might be of concern. Firstly, as simple and restricted as it is, the plot process shows that the timber is transported twice, from where it's selected to the holding bay and then to the pickup bay. Maybe a redesign of the facility could make the holding and pickup point one and save time and cost of the second move. And the flowchart shows that there's no internal control mechanism to check that the goods going out actually match the order. This operation is wide open to collusive fraud between a buyer and a yard person in this example, who might be bribed to slip in a few extra pieces with each order. And it's possible, though a little more detail would be required to establish the fact that the scheduling of order processing is not that efficient. Does the foreman deal with orders by date that they're given them, or by date the customer said they'll pick it up? If it's the former, there's probably times when orders sit for long periods awaiting collection, while others aren't ready when the customer arrives to pick them up. If any process isn't running effectively and you have a thought of a possible solution, then the next step is to consider the consequences of implementing the new way of doing things. Keep in mind that changes nearly always come with a cost attached, and while some might be essential to improve the process and are must-dos, others might repay a bit of cost-benefit analysis to see if they're worthwhile proceeding with in the first place. You should consider your cost benefits according to a set of criteria like the ones that are on the slide at the moment. You then have an idea of what you're letting yourself in for, and you can judge if it's going to be worthwhile. Many processes can be re-engineered quite simply. Set up a discount policy that allows team members to make decisions on when a discount applies, so not all requests have to be referred upwards. Only factor in a bid process where the item to supplied is a significant cost. Instead of dumping waste, see if it can be recycled, preferably by someone else coming and taking it away. Introduce a payroll software application instead of doing it all manually. There are usually a number of different options, but some can involve much more complex implementation. For example, if you want to rearrange the production line process, in those cases you might need to consider a couple of aspects. One is to develop an implementation plan with a timeline or deadlines to make sure things happen logically and by a certain date. You can use what we call a Gantt chart, G-A-N-T-T chart, for that sort of thing, and you might want to Google that. Managing the change to avoid getting your people offside, and maybe your customers too, is another aspect. Take some time to consider if your new process might not actually have the potential or may have the potential for upsetting some people. Maybe a task is removed from one person and given to another. Could that be seen by the one as having the area of responsibility diminished, or by the other as being loaded down by yet more work that could have been done by somebody else? I never suggest implementing a process without also suggesting putting some measuring standards around it. How else will you know if they're working? And by the way, that was the point of asking on that plot process form for what measured the efficiency of the process. Have a look at that when you get your action plan. The measure must be suited to the process. You could categorize them as we have on the slide, but don't complicate it. And in the example for the timber yard, I gave 3 possible measures, but one would be useful enough here, probably inventory shrinkage, because that can be the most costly, unless it's such a long drive from the storage point to the collection point that fuel costs are driving the owner broke, I guess. With a webinar to help you with key performance indicators, but I need to say here it's always important to have measurements to track progress. So don't collect them just for the sake of collecting them. That really would be a wasted effort. They should be tracked, reported regularly, communicated to the team to show how efficient they are, and if necessary, acted upon when the trend is wrong. You can make that part of the process work by following some of the suggestions that I've put there on the slide for you. Having gone to the effort to diagram, analyze, and possibly alter processes, don't throw that work away. It's the perfect basis for creating policy and procedure documents, and they're a great way to pass on to people how the new systemized processes work. If you decide to create such documents, and it's the best way to script processes so everyone is on the same page with regard to carrying them out, then make sure you follow best practice in constructing them, and I've listed them on the slide for you. For some processes, the flowchart itself may be the procedure manual document. For many others, though, a written explanation could be necessary. I prefer these policies are stored electronically to make them easier to access by team members and also to change when necessary. It also ensures they evolve with the business and make sure everyone is also using the same version. Systemizing processes is essential, sure, but remember I said that the rule was to systemize the routine and humanize the exception. It may not be necessary to cross every T and dot every I when you are developing a process. Similarly, choose only the processes that impact on important business functions to turn into formal systems. A flowchart on how to use the restroom simply isn't going to be appreciated. Leave some room for individual creativity and decision making too, where they can actually improve on the process. While too few systemized procedures means things are done the hard way, people are always fighting fires and maybe without the big enough hoses, and always trying to invent a solution on the fly. Too many of them can lead to efficiency being sacrificed through unnecessary rule following. If there's a pile of authorizations needed just to buy a part to repair a machine, then there's also going to be inefficiency and also a bit of team discontent, I might suggest. In that situation, it's not just quality that suffers, your team may not be very impressed either. You need to get a balance between setting enough systemized processes in place for the team to feel secure, that is, to know what is expected of them, but not so many that they feel controlled and common sense initiative and customer care is documented out. Don't go as far as McDonald's unless your business model is just like theirs. Keep in mind also that the end result of improving systems has to fit with the bigger business picture. Say I have a lot of customer inquiries about how to use my product and they're taking up everybody's time and no one is really responsible for ensuring the customer gets the best information and are therefore being handled inconsistently and so on. So I decide a better process is needed and I start looking into that. But maybe in improving the inquiry handling process, I'm really missing the message about why there are so many calls to start off with. Should I instead be looking at how the product operates or the user manual that goes with it? Looking at those sorts of things might actually result in largely eliminating those calls altogether. Earlier I explained why it's a good idea to systemize processes so you can hand them over to someone else knowing that the script will allow them to do it effectively. But there's no need for you to analyze, document, and continually monitor every process personally. You should get the people who actually do the jobs involved in the process as well. And not just in the role of checking if your flowchart is right or not, or by fixing last month's accident-free days report on a notice board for their information. Involving people in the context of process improvement is fundamentally about doing two things. Firstly, passing on responsibility for the process themselves to the team that perform them, while your role becomes to supply the necessary guidance and support to enable those processes to be performed well. And secondly, to encourage them to offer suggestions about the processes they deal with that would allow them to be improved on a continuing basis. When this is done, improvement actually becomes a part of your work culture. Just as health and safety is now felt to be the responsibility of all individuals, process improvement and awareness can become the responsibility of all of your team members as well. I've left talking about automation and computers to last because, as with customer relationship management and other areas, technology should be seen as the enabler and supporter of the new ways of doing things that you come up with, not as the solution itself. You need to know what you want to happen before investing in any hardware or software to help it happen. It's true that computers make a whole lot of process improvement possible, so you need to know their capabilities, and the cloud-type solutions that are available today are certainly cost-effective, state-of-the-art, and stay that way, and allow you and authorized users access to the data no matter where you happen to be anywhere in the world. Regardless of the size or type of business you have, there are probably processes that you've looked at and thought they could probably be dealt with better than they currently are. It may seem like a daunting task to start the process of analyzing and re-engineering them to be more efficient. But remember, poor processes go straight to the bottom line of your profitability. And it's not just the dollar cost of doing things inefficiently that's at stake. The primary goal of creating efficient processes is the same customer-centric goal I've preached about in many other webinars, creating happy and loyal customers. By effectively analyzing and managing your business's processes, you can create the right products with the right features at the right cost. And customers who benefit from your business running more efficiently and producing consistent high-quality products or services make for loyal and profitable customers. So I hope the ideas and techniques that I've dealt with in this presentation will at the very least allow you to get started on the path to systemizing and improving your processes and your profits. Watch out for the action plans, and I'll send you a couple of those flowchart examples too for you to have a look at. Now, I really do suggest that you put into those action plans the name of the person who's going to be the champion of that part of the project and the date that it's going to be completed by, even if that's your name in every single box. It really doesn't matter. By ensuring that you have a reasonable time frame, a reasonable expectation, really means there's no excuse not to put this in train. There really isn't. So watch out for that action plan. We tend to find that there's a much greater chance of a project and these ideas being implemented when you commit to actually putting in writing your implementation plan. So watch out for those, and remember, we're here to help you succeed. You're certainly not on your own.